Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen wa salatu wa salam ala rasulihil kareem wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een. Amma ba'd. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Today, of course, is Wednesday. Inshallah, we will be doing our Q&A first, and about 6:30 or so, we will have our tafsir session, inshallah. So first of all, before we start our Q&A, I know it's been a few days, I believe, but we have not done the trivia questions. So the last question that was mentioned was, who was the Sahabi, who was the companion of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, who was blessed with more than 100 sons and daughters? So the answer to this, Anas ibn Malik radiallahu ta'ala anhu. We know, of course, that he was extremely young at the time of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. He was a young boy who was serving Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And then he ended up being one of the final companions who passed away at over the age of 100. People say that he was around the age of 103 or so when he passed away. So obviously, during his lifetime and during his time, he must have married several times to that end. So it's mentioned in books of history that he had over 100 children, and of course from them many grandchildren, which was a great blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The second question, that how many times was the name Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, how many times is it mentioned in the Quran? So the answer to this is it's mentioned 4 times, right? The name of Muhammad itself is mentioned 4 times. Surah Ali Imran, Surah Ahzab, Surah Fath, and Surah Muhammad. So these are where the names of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam are mentioned. So another view upon the aspect of the children of Anas radiallahu ta'ala was that it's not his direct kids, but his children and his grandchildren combined. So his children as well as the grandchildren together put is 100. So I think that's the proper view when it comes to the aspect of how many children did he have. So we don't get confused with direct children versus children and grandchildren. So inshallah, that is the Q&A. The winner of that answer was Sister Sara Jilani. So Sister Sara Jilani is the winner. The next question for tomorrow is an ayah in the Quran that includes 2 aspects of news, 2 orders, meaning 2 amrs, 2 commands, and then 2 things that are forbidden. So amr and nahi, which is an aspect of commanding and an aspect of forbidding. So 2 things which are a piece of news, 2 things which are commands, 2 things which are commands of forbidding, and 2 things which are glad tidings. So what ayah of the Quran is it that has these things? Again, you have till noon tomorrow to answer. Send your email to islamstl63011@gmail.com. And inshallah, the winners or the people who answer correctly, they will be put in random order, and one winner will be selected for the $25 Panera gift card, inshallah. Okay, so as we move on to the Q&A, we have had a few questions, inshallah, that we had received, and we'll go over a couple of big questions that have been happening right now, and we'll do that at the end. But the first question that came up, mashallah, one brother asked that they'll be expecting a child any day now. So can you go over the recommended sunan practices after the birth of a child? So the first practice that is known, that when the child is born, you give the adhan in the right ear, and then you give the iqama in the left ear. So this is something that, and we had talked about this actually when we did the tafsir of the 9th juz in the Quran. We had talked about the verse, وَإِذَا خَذَ رَبُّكَ مِن بَنِي آدَمَ مِن ظُهُورِهِمْ ذُرِّيَّتَهُمْ وَأَشْهَدَهُمْ عَلَى أَنفُسِهِمْ أَلَسْتُ بِرَبِّكُمْ قَالُوا بَلَى شَهِدْنَا. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about the oath or the vow that the souls took before they were put in the world. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created all of the souls of every being, of every human being that's going to come into the world from the very beginning of time till Qiyamah. And at one point, they were all gathered over there and they took the oath of vow. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that, am I not your Rabb? And they all said, Bala shahidna, that surely we witnessed to this, that, oh Allah, you are our Rabb. So now, the question, we had talked about the aspect of our souls obviously said this, but we don't remember that. And the souls at that time didn't have that aql and they don't have that understanding. So what was the benefit of that? One of the examples that we gave was the aspect of giving the adhan and the iqama in the baby's ear. Why is it done, right? So you give the adhan and the iqama. When the baby grows up, they're not going to remember and tell you that, yeah, I remember that day when so-and-so gave the adhan and the iqama in my ear when I was born, and I understood what it meant too. They're not going to say that. But rather, it's there to signify that as an extension of that vow that was given on that particular day when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took the vows of the souls in Jannah, right? So this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did. And it's also such that doing a good practice and a good action like this, it has effect upon a person, right? It's a means of fitrah. The deen is a fitrah. It will have a good effect that the person will then later on understand that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the Rabb, and so on and so forth. So that's one thing, calling the adhan in the right ear and the iqamah in the left ear of the baby. Another sunnah practice is tahniq. This is one that is, nowadays a lot of people tend to forget this sunnah. Right, it's mentioned throughout the hadith that one time when a companion had a child and they brought the baby to Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, he moistened a very small piece of date from on his tongue. He moistened it and then he put it on the palate of the baby's tongue. Right, this is what he did. He put it on the palate of the baby. So it's a recommended sunnah and a practice to do that. If one does not have a date, a very, very tiny piece, obviously, it's a baby, you can do anything sweet. Even a very tiny, minute, small amount of honey or something like that will do, where you do this aspect of tahniq for the baby. And it's mentioned that a pious person or an upright person should do this particular practice. Another sunnah is making sure that you give the baby a good name. That's also important. Nowadays, people like to kind of go that unusual route, right? This name sounds exotic. Let's give the baby this name. We tend not to go to those traditional names anymore, like Abdullah, Abdurrahman, all those beautiful names that are out there that have nice meanings, names of Sahaba, names of prophets, whatever else it may be. Nowadays, we tend to go to these exotic names that are there. And I'm not saying that's haram, but at the end of the day, it is good to call a person with a nice name that has a nice meaning. It also has a psychological effect upon the person when they are named a good name. So that's something which is important. Then another sunnah is obviously the aqiqah. We know the aqiqah is something which is a recommended practice, and it's mentioned in narrations that for a boy, 2 animals, sheep or goat, are slaughtered, while for a girl, 1 animal, or even 1 animal for a boy is fine as well. And those who cannot afford to do it, then there's no harm in even not doing that in any way. But it's in the hadith about when the grandchildren of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam were born, this was a practice that was done when it came to the aqiqah. Then another recommendation that's mentioned, and again there's differences of opinion with this, but some of the madhahib mention that shaving of the head is an act which is a mu'akkada, or it's a sunnah in the sense that it should be done. And some mention that it's just a recommendation, that even if you don't do it, it's fine. So there are some people who shave the head and some people who don't. And then on top of that, the weight of the hair, which is in very minute amount of grams or barely would weigh anything, you give some charity with that. So these are some of the sunan that are mentioned that are done when a child is born. Okay, second question. This has to do with cross-contamination. Somebody said that they ordered a sandwich for delivery, and normally that sandwich would have bacon on it, but if they specified, of course, that do not put bacon on it. But the restaurant had forgotten and they put bacon on the sandwich anyway. So they said if they take the bacon off the sandwich, can they still eat it? So the answer is no, because the aspect of cross-contamination, you have to remember that the juices from that bacon, which is pork obviously, whatever it touched, and even if it was beef or it was something else, it would not be halal because it's not slaughtered in the Islamic way. If it touches the other portion of the sandwich, then in that case there would be cross-contamination, so it would become impermissible in that particular case. Okay, if somebody has a 401k account and interest money starts accruing in that account, so the question is that they don't have access to those funds right now, but they had 2 questions. Number 1, can they leave those funds in the 401k account, and can they use them to pay taxes on the investments at the withdrawal of funds? That's number 1. Second question is, if they have to pay the interest in sadaqah now, can I claim a tax deduction on that amount? The reason why they say pay it in sadaqah is because the ulama give the fatwa normally that when it comes to any interest money that a person has, then they should, if they cannot return it back to the source where it came from, then dispose of it by giving it to the poor and the needy without the intention of gaining hasanat and reward from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's why that question was asked. So the answer to the first question is one cannot pay their taxes with interest money. because that is something which they are getting a direct benefit from. And interest, we know, is haram. So when a person is getting direct benefit in that way, one cannot do so. Secondly, when it comes to the tax deduction, however, if one gives the sadaqah for that, they are allowed to claim a tax deduction since they had paid taxes on their general wealth as is, so they can claim that amount back. Meaning, this obviously the taxes that were paid were on things that were halal before, so you can claim a deduction back on those types of things. Third question is zakah on rental property. That you have to pay zakah on the value of the rental property or just the income that comes from a rental property. So the answer to that is just the income that comes from the rental property, because the property is still in your ownership. So as long as it's not for sale and it's just for rent, then you don't pay on the property itself, just on the income that you make from that. Can you recite loudly in Fajr Salah, Maghrib Salah, and Isha Salah when you are praying alone and not in congregation? The answer is yes, you can do so. Okay, I have a question about who I can give zakat to. Is it permissible to give zakat to my father's older brother? So, your uncle, your chacha. Can you give zakat to your chacha? The answer is yes. And the only people you cannot give zakat to are your own parents or grandparents or anywhere up the line, or your own children or grandchildren or anywhere down the line, and your spouse. All of these groups you cannot give zakat to, but anyone else you are allowed to give zakat to, whether they're your aunts, uncles, cousins, whatever it may be, you can do that. Can you give your in-laws zakah? Yes, you can give your in-laws zakah. Okay, now a couple of questions that have come up. Tonight, of course, is the 21st night, inshallah, from the time of Maghrib. So one of the questions that came up, and a lot of brothers have been asking me about this, that if we want to do i'tikaf, how can we do i'tikaf when the masajid are closed, right? So now the answer is, for men, the unanimous ruling from the ulama and the scholars is that the place of the i'tikaf of sunnah mu'akkada al-kifaya, which is the last days of Ramadan, is the masjid, is the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now this year, of course, the masajid are closed due to the COVID situation. So therefore, in place of that, you can obviously in your home do as much ibadah and worship as you can, but it will not count as the sunnah mu'akkad al-kifaya i'tikaf. Now, if a person had the intention in their heart that, oh Allah, if the masjid was open, then I would have been there and I would have made the intention to go and make the i'tikaf in these last 10 days of Ramadan, it is not, it's in the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He can give you the reward for that, right? So what a person should do is, instead of then being at the masjid, they should try to dedicate themselves in their home and try to do as much ibadah and worship that they can in their home, just like they would do in the masjid. And inshallah, they will get that same reward as they would have gotten when they did the sunnah mu'akkad al-kifaya i'tikaf in the masajid. Now, when it comes to women, a lot of the schools of thought for women say that the masjid also was the place for the i'tikaf for the women. Now, in the Hanafi madhab, the mentioning in the Hanafi madhab is that the better place for the woman besides the masjid for i'tikaf is the home, meaning designate a room in the home for i'tikaf and then do it over there, and a person will get the reward for that, right? Other schools of thought say that i'tikaf, the sunnah mu'akkad al-kifaya, is also the masjid. And even the Hanafis say that that's also an opinion, but they also give the opinion that she can do that i'tikaf within the home. So that's what's mentioned over there. Okay, and the final question that we have is another big question that came up. Obviously, this year with the COVID situation, we are not going to have a large gathering, Eid Salah. So now the question comes up, can we do Eid Salah at home? If so, what are the recommendations and whatnot? So again, just as with everything, there are differences of opinion when it comes to the ulama, when it comes to the schools of thought, when it comes to the various madahib. So when you go to the Hanafis say that Eid Salah itself, doing it in the community aspect in congregation, it's actually a farad kifaya, or it's a wajib. It's something which is not farad kifaya, it's a wajib. It's something which is an obligation, right? So it's just under farad. It's that important. But the Hanafis also say that if a person has missed the congregation of Eid Salah, then in that case, there is no Eid Salah that's done privately in the home, but rather one should just go home and do Salatul Duha, 2 rak'ah or 4 rak'ah of Salatul Duha, which we say like Ishraq Salah or the mid-morning Salah, which I think in Urdu they say Chasht, right? The Chasht prayer that people have heard of, to do that. Other schools of thought, like the Shafi'i madhab, the Maliki madhab, and the Hanbali madhab, they don't have a category of wajib. It's either something is farad or something is less than that. It's a sunnah or whatever else it may be. So now they say that if you have missed the congregation in the large gathering, then they do permit you to do it at home, and that's whether it's done individually or as a family or whatever else it may be, because they deemed the Eid prayer similar to any other nafil prayer. So in light of that situation, those who are able to pray the Eid Salah at home, since the other madhahib give that opinion, then it is permitted for one to do the Eid Salah at home if they wish. But if they don't do it and if they do Salatul Duha instead, then there is no blame in doing that either, right? So either way, you can do that particular opinion. Now, if one does it at home, we know that there are different methods that are done for that. For example, in the Hanafi madhab, there are 6 extra takbirat that are done. The first 3 are done before the first rak'ah, yani after you do takbir ula and you do the thana, then you do 3 extra takbirat, you do Fatiha and the surah. In the second rak'ah, you do Fatiha and the surah, then you do the 3 extra takbirat before the ruku', right? So that's the way it's done in the Hanafi madhab. But in the Shafi madhab, we know that after the takbir ula and after the thana, then one does 7 extra takbirat in the first rak'ah before Surah Fatiha and the surah. And then in the second rak'ah, when they stand up, they do 5 takbirat before the Surah Fatiha and the surah. So that's how it's done in the Shafi madhab. And then the khutbah of Eid is also a sunnah to do afterwards. Basic khutbah can be done. Even if one does not do the khutbah, it's a sunnah. But if one is able to do something very brief, then that will be good and it will fulfill the sunnah of that as well. And inshallah, maybe when it comes to the time that when Eid comes closer, then we can send out maybe a very brief and easy khutbah if somebody wishes to do that. So those are some of the things when it comes to the practice of i'tikaf as well as the Eid Salah. Once again, if anyone has any other questions for next week, Wednesday, please send your questions to mufti@islamstl.org, and we will inshallah answer as many as we can on Wednesdays. Somebody had mentioned no voice. Somebody had mentioned no voice in the comments. I'm hoping that was not the case. If somebody can comment and please put that the voice was fine, inshallah. Okay, alhamdulillah. Jazakallah khair. Jazakallah khair. So got some messages that the voice was fine. Okay, so inshallah we will end there for the Q&A. Around just before 6:30, inshallah, we will go live once again for the tafsir. We will go over the next 2 juz, which are juz number 20 and juz number 21, inshallah. Jazakallahu khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.